9 times the speed of sound.
Guys, welcome back to the channel. My sister's Q5 is back here for his first oil change since we did the B12 piston soak. So in today's video, we're going to figure out whether that was actually successful in eliminating the oil consumption and really what the oil consumption is after the process. If you stick around at the end of the video, I'm going to go through some of the most common questions and comments I received in the first two videos, try and see if I can help you guys to perform this on your own personal cars and solve your own oil burning issues. All right, but that's at the end of the video. First things first, let's check the motor. And the car has eaten its liter of oil. There's no light yet, which means that we're probably right on the line up there. And we're currently sitting at 205, 109. Of course, the trip computer got reset in the process. I was hoping that I would use that to, track the mileage. But in any case, when I did the oil change, we were at 199, 693, which puts us at about 5,400 kilometers. So in 5,400 kilometers, the car has killed a liter of oil. Now, that's obviously well above the Volkswagen spec of 1 liter per 1,000 kilometers. And it also means that as long as my oil changes are kept at 5,000 kilometers, I don't actually have to add any oil to the engine between oil changes. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the oil consumption actually slowed down for the first 5,000 kilometers. So it went through the first 80% of that liter in the first 2,000, 2,500 kilometers, and then it slowed down. So the last 20% took about 2,000 kilometers complete. To me, that means that the oil consumption is improving as the vehicle is being driven, but there's only one way to confirm that, and that will be monitoring the consumption over the next 5,000 kilometers and before the next oil change to see if I'm in fact correct and the consumption slows down and whether it's going to get better for the second oil change. With that out of the way, let's go take a look at the plugs. Let's scope the cylinders and let's check the compression of the motor. The fork coils are actually looking dry. You remember in the previous video I showed, I think it was number 2, was soaked in oil. So perhaps we don't have a leaking valve cover gasket. These ones are pretty dry after 5,000 kilometers. The plugs are looking consistent. There's no carbon buildup on them. They're dry. And those are new. Remember, I replaced those when I did the last oil change. Let's take a look at the compression. The last thing I want to do, take a quick look inside the cylinders just to see how the pistons are looking. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to see inside. The pistons will look pretty clean, but they weren't all that terrible to begin with, so I'm not really surprised. Let's just go ahead and change the oil and take a quick sample just to see how bad it is. Here we go. The oil is still pretty black, you can tell, but is nowhere near as dirty as it was the first time I pulled it out. There is no feeling of sand particles at all. It's nice, clean, smooth oil. Yeah, it's definitely not as dirty as it was before. Like, you can still kind of see the color of it. So this is a pretty good sign, I think. It's 5,000 kilometers, so it's looking somewhat decent. Let's rub the filter out while the oil is draining. 5W40 synthetic. I'm not putting any additives in this. Our consumption is well within specs, so there's really no need to add anything anymore. Coils. All right, guys, so clearly this works. The Q5 is more or less cured. We went from 1 liter per 580 kilometers to 1 liter per oil change at about 5,000 kilometers. The oil burning has not disappeared. I never really expected it to disappear. I never thought it would disappear, but the treatment has gotten us to a point where we don't have to add any oil between oil changes, which is a drastic improvement. Now, as I promised, I want to go through some of the questions and comments you guys posted on the video. It's been up for about 2 months now. The response has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for the comments and the positive and negative feedback that you've left behind, because I think this will help all of us sort of deal with the issue that we're dealing with and try and improve this process as much as possible. First things first, shout out to DIY Dave. He's the person that I watched originally, I think it was over a year ago. Once I read about the option of possibly doing a piston soak for the 2-liter turbo, I watched these videos. That gave me a little bit of confidence to actually go ahead and try it on my motor. And as you can tell, the results are absolutely phenomenal. If you've never seen his channel, by all means, go check it out. He does a lot of testing on his Corolla. So there's some really good information to gain there. The second thing I want to talk about was the good and bad and the ugly of the process. You've seen the good. If you've read the comments below, you know that multiple viewers are reporting improving or completely resolving the oil burning issues. This is significant. Now for the bad, is this treatment really fixing your engine? No, it's not. You're obviously not replacing the piston rings, which are causing the issue. You're not changing the pistons, which I believe in the Audis are what's really causing some of the problems. So absolutely no, you're not fixing your engine. However, the cost differential between the two solutions is significant. Multiple users have commented below saying that this is obviously not a solution and you should just go ahead and fix your engine, and why are we wasting our time with these sort of fixes? Well, that comment is not necessarily wrong, and I would agree that the best way to fix this is to rebuild an engine. The problem is a return on investment. All right, some of the quotes that I've heard so far in the $10,000 to $12,000 for an engine rebuild to deal with this issue, for a car that's maybe worth $8,000 in a good working condition. Nobody in their right mind is gonna go ahead and spend that kind of money. And the fact is, even if you're able to fix the car by yourself and spend the week or whatever it's gonna take you to do this in your garage or driveway, the cost is just not there, right? Like if you're just buying parts, they're $1,500 to $2,000 for, you know, the full set of stuff that you have to replace, compared to an oil change and, you know, 2 cans of B12 to the cost of $40. So we'll just leave that there. As for the ugly, only one viewer has actually reported issues with their motor after doing the treatment. Unfortunately, that viewer did not provide any details as to how the treatment was performed or actually what happened after with the motor. The only thing they said was that after doing the treatment, they got an oil pressure light, which avalanched into multiple thousands of dollars to fix their engine, full stop. Sounds to me like whatever shop they took their car to get it looked at for the oil pressure issue did not really know anything about these engines, because oil pump is about the last thing that causes issues with oil pressure. But we're gonna leave it at that. Without any more information, it's really hard for me to address any of that. So all I'm gonna say about that is there's clearly a risk to doing this service. Keep that in mind. Don't freak out if you're having any issues after performing this service. We're all here to help. You know, let us know what you did. Let us know what's going on. Don't call the shop immediately and take your car there so, you know, they can charge you $10,000 to rebuild your engine because, you know, you have a misfire or something like that. With that out of the way, let's have a look at some of the questions and comments you guys have left on the video and see if we can help out. First thing, probably the most popular question that I've seen, B12 isn't available where I live. Can I use anything else? Yeah, unfortunately, it seems B12 is not available anywhere else other than the US. Certainly not in the Chem tool form that myself and DIY Dave used in our cars. Can you use anything else? Yes, absolutely. I suspect a lot of other things will work. The question is how effective any of that other stuff will be. And until you guys try it out, it's really hard for me to answer that question. In the first video I posted when I was working on my A4, I actually did a piston soak with STP and seafoam because the B12 that I had ordered had still not arrived and I ran out of patience. So I just decided to do sort of a piston soak with STP under the assumption it's not going to really do anything, but it was at least sort of a trial run, if you will. To my surprise, that fixed the severe engine misfire that I was dealing with on the A4. If you remember, cylinder 2 was completely soaked in oil and that disappeared. So right there, clearly there are alternatives to B12 that can potentially fix your engine. Following that, I ended up running B12 that ended up fixing my A4. So I cannot really tell you whether it was the STP alone or the STP plus B12 or the B12 that ended up fixing the oil burning completely. But the fact is STP and seafoam resolved the misfire. So they fixed the cylinder 2 piston rings enough to make the car drivable again. So as far as alternatives are concerned, I suppose you can, you know, do one of two things. The first thing is find yourself sort of an injector cleaner, fuel system cleaner alternative to B12. There should be lots of those. Try to find something in bigger quantities. Most of the stuff that's sold in Canada as injector cleaners usually comes in small packs that you just kind of put in your tank and run once. So obviously you're looking at something a little bit bigger. B12 is about 450 milliliters per can. I use 2 cans on the flush, so you're looking at about 1 liter of whatever it is you're going to buy to do the service. The second alternative to that would be the sort of engine treatment, which is where Seafoam and STP kind of fall in. These are generally advertised as being safe for anything. You can put them in the fuel system and you'll clean your injectors. You can put them in the oil and you'll do an engine flush. There's really nothing you can go wrong with these. They are designed to be running the engine, so you're not really going to have any issues. Really, the question here is how strong are they and whether they're going to be very effective in fixing the problem. If I myself was going to do this again, I think the first thing I would try would be Liquid Moly Engine Flush Pro line, which is designed to be run as an engine flush. In other words, you add it to your oil, run the engine for about 15 minutes, and you dump it out. So it should be strong enough to provide a similar to B12 sort of result. I believe Liquid Moly is generally available all over the world, so you should have no problem getting your hands on that and giving that a try. If you do end up trying it, please do comment below and let us know if this worked out, because I think a lot of folks are looking for an alternative to B12. And unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head what is and what isn't available in Europe or Australia or Brazil for that matter. The second question that I've seen pop up quite a bit is whether this will work on a diesel engine. There's no real reason why this process cannot work on a diesel engine. Structurally, they're the same thing. So if your diesel engine is burning oil that you cannot trace to, you know, a leaking turbo, whatever, and you know that it's a piston ring thing, then absolutely you can do a piston soak. The third question that popped up quite a few times: will this treatment damage my catalytic converters? Hard for me to answer. There's no way for me to say no, because clearly you're burning something that is not air mixed with fuel and is passing through your cat converters. That said, generally B12 is an injector cleaner, which is meant to be introduced into your fuel system and burned with fuel to go through your cat converters. So burning B12 in and on itself should not really damage your catalytic converters. The second point to that is when you're dealing with the issues that most of us are dealing with, which is burning a liter of oil every 2, 3, 5, 700 kilometers, whatever it is, you can just picture the amount of oil that's actually going through your car and getting into your catalytic converter. So while the B12 may damage your catalytic converter, burning that much amount of oil will definitely cause issues with your catalytic converter. So suppose the only thing I can really say here is pick the least of all evils, which as far as I'm concerned is solve your oil burning issues so that you don't have to deal with it anymore. I certainly didn't see any issues with my cat converters after doing the treatment on 2 cars. None of the viewers that have actually done this service reported any issues with their cat converters, so I think you're fairly safe on the cat converter side. Another common question that I've seen is, do I have to turn the crank after pouring B12 in it, and can I use a starter to do that? I think rotating the crank is pretty important because it will just simply allow the liquid to go around the piston a little bit better and perhaps penetrate the soot around the piston rings a little bit better. You don't really have to do that, but I suppose that affects the effectiveness of the method. Can you use a starter to turn the crank? I would highly advise against that. If you hit the starter, it turns the crank too fast and it will simply evacuate all of the liquid out of your cylinders. So actually you're doing yourself a disservice by throwing away the B12. Do it by hand. It's a size 24 socket or whatever it is on the crank. It's not too complicated. Do have access from the bottom of the car and you can turn the crank without any issues. So yeah, turn the crank, turn it by hand, don't use the starter, and do that every 6 hours. The last question that was interesting to talk about was the idea of putting the spark plugs in before turning the crank by hand to sort of create compression in the cylinder and force that liquid down into the piston rings. That was a great idea that I also had when I did the process, but I'll be honest with you, when I did that, I could not turn the crank. Whether that's because I had too much liquid in the cylinders and I was simply not able to compress them, I could not tell you. However, it was pretty clear that I wasn't going to be able to turn the crank with the spark plugs inside. So I took the spark plugs off, crank turned fine, and off I went. So I think my answer to that is don't do that. Do not put the plugs back in and try and turn the crank with the liquid inside. I think you may cause a little bit more damage than the benefit that you might get from forcing that liquid around. I think that covers the sort of the most common questions that I had. I've tried to answer everybody's comments as they came through. Hopefully that's helped you guys out. Like I said, I'm kind of keeping a tally of sort of good stories versus bad stories. Really, we've only had one sort of negative story with basically no information. Everybody else seems to report this being a successful way of dealing with the oil burning on their 2 liters and actually other motors as well. There is one comment that keeps popping up, and frankly, the first couple of times I read it, I kind of laughed. And then after that, I started kind of doubting myself and kind of trying to think about it a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to mention it. A lot of you folks seem to have a problem with the way I'm putting the spark plugs into, the head. Frankly, I've done this for the last 20 years. I've never had an issue with a spark plug gap. I've never had an issue with a broken spark plug or anything like that. So I had to really think about this. Is this warranted? Am I really doing something wrong? And I'm going to answer the comment in sort of a two-way, because frankly, I think there's two answers to this. The first answer is you're absolutely right. Be as careful as you possibly can. There's really no reason why you should be dropping spark plugs inside. If you have a better way to do it, by all means, go for it. The second answer is a little bit more practical. If you think about it, there's really nothing for that spark plug to hit on its way down. The electrode goes into a hole and there's nothing for it to hit, for it to alter the spark plug gap. So I've verified this multiple times. I had to go back and verify it on the Q5 just so I can make sure that I'm obviously not saying something completely insane. But there's nothing under there for the spark plug to hit. I'm not throwing spark plugs on the ground here. So I'm going to continue to do it the way I'm doing it, but you guys should definitely not do that, and you should be as careful as you possibly can with your spark plugs. All right? Okay. All right, guys, I think it's time to wrap this episode here. I do live in Canada. It is October, which means that in about 2 days, it will probably start snowing. And as you can tell, there's about 1,000 different projects behind me that still need to be finished before that happens. Thank you so much for watching the oil consumption videos, and thank you for all of the positive feedback and comments that you left. Honestly, knowing that I've helped you save thousands of dollars and more importantly, keep your Audis on the road is making me happy and smile every single day. Please continue to share your experiences with the piston soaking process, and if you have any more questions that I haven't already addressed, by all means add them in the comments below and I'll try to get to them as fast as I can. Once again, thank you so much for watching these videos, and as always, if you like what you see, click a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, click subscribe. And rest assured, no spark plugs were hurt during the making of these videos. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.